I realize I have not made a 2024 kind of movies I watched, and the end of January is rapidly approaching, aka like there's one more week left. And so I figured now was the last possible chance for me to be able to talk about the movies that I loved from last year before it's like basically irrelevant, and bigger titles for 2025 start coming out. Yes, I'm so excited that Brave New World is like a mere 3 weeks away. In 2024, I was really bummed to kind of come to the end of the year and only have watched 22 new releases within the year, when in years past I've done like 30 or 40. Okay, so coming in at number 10 is Inside Out 2, which is a film that I deeply resonated with, and I know that everyone is really excited about the hype that Flo has going into the Oscars, coming off the Golden Globes win in the category, and I don't know exactly what the Oscars will shape up to look like with the hype that Flo has. Probably more people will watch it after the Golden Globes win than would have beforehand, but I still think that Inside Out, for being a corporate sequel Disney Pixar output, I loved it. I feel like the character of anxiety specifically felt like a really like important idea to add in a way that I have to keep thinking about the way it is represented in that film, and how it's like anxiety can be a good thing. Anxiety, the way that most of us experience it, is not really thought of as a positive emotion or an emotion that should be like a part of the bunch. And I think I'm glad too, in a lot of ways, that this film wasn't a flop, because I was really nervous. Like, I didn't feel like it needed a sequel at the time that this was announced, and I was honestly like very disappointed to hear that there was going to be a sequel, because it just didn't feel necessary in my opinion. But after having watched it, I really liked it. I've talked a lot in my review about how I think that some of the other characters and or moments feel like scraps from the first film. Doesn't make them bad, it just feels like, okay, yeah, this isn't maybe as like well thought through and tied together, and I don't think that this one will be as much of a staple as the first one, but this is certainly one that I will, I guess maybe let me take that back, because I would definitely show this to my children, because I think if I had had this as a kid, it would have helped me explain and or process certain things in a way that I just didn't get to until I was a little bit older. Then at 9, Saturday Night. This movie has completely fallen out of the awards conversation, and I guess I kind of get it. Probably a lot of the rest of the films I'm going to talk about have, with maybe one or two exceptions. But Saturday Night was so fun and explained to me kind of why I do love SNL, despite kind of not always watching it live, or not necessarily like growing up watching Saturday Night Live, but why it is such a staple of American culture and of American comedy, and why it is still on today, 50 years later. I thought it was a great film. I thought the young cast of up-and-coming, somewhat unknown to some, in some cases, actors coming together to make this film was really fun. Plus, I am a sucker for a little bit of verisimilitude, which is making things look alike even if they're not the same, costume designs, period pieces, having people play these characters. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I just thought it was great. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was really true to the heart of what Lorne Michaels intended SNL to be, and what a lot of people who become a part of that SNL cast imagine the experience to be, and how they reflect on it. So I think there's almost that truth of this movie in how people are feeling about the thing, rather than the actual here's what happened, here's what happened, here's what happened. Then at number 8, We Live in Time. Again, another one completely not being talked about. I know in some cases, in some parts of the world, We Live in Time I don't think has even had its wide release, so I don't know how that works in terms of award conversation, but God, Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are two of the greatest working actors today. They are so good at what they do. This film is really excruciatingly beautiful, and my review has done really well, which thank you to you guys. So I keep getting a lot of comments to get to go back to the review and look back at what you guys are connecting to about the film, what parts of my review that I talked about that you guys have picked up on. You're absolutely right. The one comment about the bins moment in this movie is really heartbreaking and beautiful and true to human experience. I just think the way that this film explores grief and or coming to terms with the loss of a loved one while they're still with you, I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's not just like, oh, this is perfectly captured grief, but it just explores it in a way that's not just, it's just not a cut and dry thing. It's not something that is, I don't know, I think that's a specifically unique form of grief, is when you know that the person has a terminal illness, but that time has not come to pass yet, right? It's you dealing with it in the moment, struggling with that acceptance versus hope, versus like depression about the situation. I just think it's really beautiful. The little girl in the movie is so cute and good. I think I've talked about the like not lack of continuity, but I always forget this word. Why do I struggle with this so much? Anyways, the fact that the film is told not in chronological order, I would have been interested, I think, to see it in that form. A couple people have commented that as well, I believe, but I think it works really well because it works as a almost flash of a memory while this other thing in the present moment is happening, and or the way that like your memory of someone is not chronological, whether they're alive or whether they've passed. Like it's, you think about those things out of turn, out of order. And so I really like that. 7 is Dune Part 2. I do really like this movie. I know every time I've made a Dune review, I've been like, huh? And I always get some really nasty comments, which is why I don't like talking about Dune on the internet anymore, because people be nasty about this movie and I don't know why. I don't know what it is about Dune fans. I don't know if you guys have been like wronged by George Lucas or something with the fact that like you haven't gotten the same level of prestige as Star Wars has in terms of like franchise and beloved. I don't know if it's just that you like to tell girls on the internet talking about the movie and how it might have been confusing at certain parts that they don't know what they're talking about. But every time I've watched Dune, I can see that there's a deep lore and there's a level of politics there. Clearly, I am not a smart enough, scheming enough person to get every single little thing that's going on. And I also think I'm better when it's in a book form, which I do have the whole book collection there. I intend to read it at some point. I've started it. I got like 20 pages in, but then I was like, I want to just see the movie first, and then I will go and read the book, and or I wasn't in the, I wanted to read other things. I wanted to read my girly books. Okay, leave me alone. But I did really like this movie. This movie is phenomenal achievement of cinema, and I have to always give it to a film that is going to be quote unquote awards worthy while also being basically a blockbuster. Like Dune is a blockbuster. It's just a very cinematic, artistic, auteur-driven film with a very high caliber cast. I would argue that there have been other things that are that. Now, I won't say that like Avengers Endgame is as pretty as Dune Part 2. I'm not trying to make that argument, people. Please don't get at me. But I think that this film is really amazing, and I was really excited to see it a part of the Oscars conversation because I know some people had speculated that potentially it would fall out because it is a sequel. And do I think it will win a lot of awards? No. But I'm glad that it's a part of the conversation because it deserves to be, because it's an incredible film. And then at 6, Wicked. Okay, listen, I know people are going to be like, oh, you're going to put Wicked of Dune. Yes, it's my list. I don't care. I'm so sorry. It's my list. I don't need your input on it. Wicked, to me, I saw Wicked for the first time when I was 14. When I was 2014, when I was 14. And it just really resonated with me, as it does to anyone who has ever felt a little bit different than anybody else that they're around. It's a very universal story. It's tackling a universal theme. And I think that it was able to be adapted very truthfully from the musical while adding. Now, my biggest critique of this film is that it's a little long, but I'm going to say the same thing that I said about Spider-Man No Way Home. If you were to cut things, what would you cut, and would that make fans angrier than not? Like, I know there's a lot of people talking about the Jonathan Bailey clips and the Frolicking the Field bits or whatever that have been cut, and that John M. Chu has said, oh, maybe they'll come out on a DVD or something like that, but I genuinely think that the film is as long as it is able to be. I think it's a little bit unnecessarily long. However, I will say that there are some things that are more explained in the musical and have filled in gaps, and that makes me excited for part 2, because after kind of reflecting on at least what I remember about Wicked, I feel like the most iconic parts of Wicked, no, I don't want to say that. I'll say it. I don't want to get attacked on the internet, but I'll say it. I feel like part 1 has the more iconic songs, with the exception of For Good and As Long As You're Mine. Now, I know everybody's gonna be like, what about No Good Deed? What about blah, blah, blah? I'm sorry. I think we can all agree that Popular and Defying Gravity and The Wizard and I and No One Warns the Wicked are probably the most iconic songs of Wicked, with the exception of For Good. But For Good is a little bit more sad, so even if it's a power song, it's not as much as like Defying Gravity. Anyways, I really, really love this movie. I'm very excited for part 2 later this year, or Wicked For Good. And I think what am I trying to say? The the fact that it was able to be adapted so successfully, I think is even bigger of an achievement than just saying like, oh, it was adapted well. Like, I think adapting something well is proving to be more and more difficult as we go on. And I think this did it really well. Okay. Number 5, bit of a, I don't want to say controversial choice, but one you'll probably not see coming. And that's A Quiet Place Day One. Hear me out. Okay. This film, once again, much like We Live in Time, unfortunately, there are 2 in my top 10 movies that are about cancer or a terminal illness. But I think the concept of people are like, well, I don't really care how day one of Quiet Place worked. I only care about John Krasinski's little family in Quiet Place universe. And I get that. I hear me out. But the 2 specific characters they chose to write this story about, this feels like I don't want to say better written because the other 2 are pretty well written. But like, this feels like if you're going to make a franchise film, make it something that's as interesting as this, of a character. One character has terminal illness, so doesn't really care that this zombie invasion is happening. Like, genuinely is just like, I'm going to die anyway. Like, I don't care. I just want pizza. And then you have another character who is a traveler during a crisis event, one that's going to reshape the way everyone else sees the world. And that kind of unlikely bond of somebody that desperately needs somebody that knows where they're at to help them, and the other person who really couldn't care less. It's a really, really fun, like, unlikely duo kind of thing, with like, not fun in the way of fun as in it's good, not fun as in it's fun, because it's obviously a little bit sadder of a film. But I think it explores the idea of letting go of life as you know it, embracing change, the fears and anxieties of people that wouldn't just go away if the world started to end, and or how we would all act. And I think it's really exciting, and I think Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, once again, 2 of the greater working actors today. Joseph Quinn, I'm not saying I'm out on him, I'm just saying that this project, Gladiator, to me, he's doing good. He's on the up and up. Lupita Nyong'o is already up here. That's Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o. So anyways, number 4 will surprise no one, Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, I'm kind of surprised this isn't much higher. In fact, I debated putting it behind A Quiet Place Day One. But again, a lot of times I rank these based on the likelihood to rewatch, which maybe Wicked should then be above A Quiet Place Day One. But I think I have more faults with Wicked than I do with A Quiet Place Day One. Again, maybe because I watched it twice. But with Deadpool and Wolverine, I think this is a really, I don't want to say bold choice for Marvel, because obviously Deadpool was successful. Bringing back Hugh Jackman was going to be successful. Like, there's nothing about this film that really is like risk-taking in terms of the profitability there. However, the pushing the MCU's own boundaries and doing it in a way that feels true to the character, that doesn't like expect the entire rest of the MCU to be there, and also, quite honestly, making a Deadpool film in a world that already exists with The Boys and Invincible, because to my understanding, the first 2 Deadpool films came out prior to that, and that's why I think the first 2 Deadpool films were so successful, is because they didn't have anything that was this edgy superhero content on the market. Whereas now you have these other things that are in multiple different seasons, that have multiple different iterations. The Boys already has a spin-off, for goodness sake, and instead you're trying to lean into this. I also put this high because I think while this film is really funny and raunchy and crass, I think it really leans into the heart at the center of, hey, all of these Marvel movies are beloved by people who, you know, maybe more true MCU fans now, but were part of their childhood or their young adulthood or just years ago, because, or starting the careers of these actors, because it was an entirely different, separate form of Marvel. This is the Spider-Man No Way Home love letter to Fox, 20th Century Fox, that No Way Home was to Sony and the Spider-Man films being outside of the MCU. So love that film for that reason. Also, anytime you're going to bring back the TVA, I'm going to be happy about it. Okay, now number 3 is probably like the one that I haven't talked about the most, but I really, really love, and that was Challengers. I loved Challengers, and every time I think about that movie, and especially now thinking about it not having any Oscars to its name, I get happy about thinking about it, frustrated about not having Oscars. This movie was so incredible from the cinematography. Like, you cannot tell me that those tennis ball camera shots at the end of the film didn't make you want to get out of your seat in a theater. For little movie nerds like me, this is sports. This is cinema. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you want me to tell you. I thought this film was so good. I thought Zendaya was phenomenal in this. I think Art is literally his name in the film. Josh O'Connor, Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor. I think, like, it's just so good. The film screams it's beautiful to me. I love the way the story is told. Like, you will get me every time with as long as it's good. I say you'll get me every time, but probably you will. Of the non-linear storytelling, like non-chronological storytelling. I want to know at this moment, why should I care more that this character is stressed or doing this thing for no money or blah, blah, blah. I also just think it was such an interesting depiction and exploration of young athletes at the top of their game and how injuries, life circumstances change how they interact with their sport. I also just think that the messy relationships in this, I am a person that likes to go very by the book in terms of life and doing things what I think is the right way. And so I like watching characters mess up their own lives, okay? Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to play that game. I only got one shot at this. But I can watch an infinite number of people mess up their life on screen. And I will do so every time. Number 2, Twisters. God, I love this movie. I watched it twice. This is the epitome of a summer blockbuster. If you want to make disaster films, make them like this. And you might be saying to yourself, okay, so just put a Hawkeye in it. And to some extent, yes, actually, just put a Hawkeye in it. But give me a soundtrack that goes with a movie that is made by artists either from the region or it, like the country album pairing with this. I can't tell you how much that has shaped my idea of marketing. Like, I mean, it's kind of the same way as like I feel like the Barbie soundtrack includes the songs in the film at certain pivotal points. Honestly, Ain't No Love in Oklahoma not being nominated for an Oscar. Where's the outrage? Where is the revolution? Because we should be mad. Quite honestly, we should. I thought this movie was phenomenal. I thought it was fun. I thought it was exciting. It felt like a movie that people don't make anymore because it's relatively simple. Like, we don't need something that's super fancy. We don't need something with a bunch of plot points and not plot points, but like depth and lore. I love those things. And easily any other year, something like that could be higher on this list. But there's something base level about this film that I'm really excited for. And I don't want to make predictions yet, but I kind of feel like what I've seen from Jurassic World Rebirth, we're kind of returning to this, of like this idea of like, okay, there can be people in like nondescript era clothing solving some big issue. And as long as you make the big issue like personally relevant to the characters, I'm there. I'm excited. I don't need a bunch of science mumbo jumbo. I don't need I'm not here to pick holes. I'm here to eat popcorn and look at Glenn Powell chase some tornadoes. That's it. And then number 1 is a movie I've talked about at length. I think I saw it at least twice last year. I might have seen it 3-ish times, and that's The Fall Guy. I thought this movie was spectacular. I thought it was fun. I thought it was well written. I thought it was poking fun at the industry. I thought it was celebrating and giving love to these stunt people that support Hollywood. I thought it was a wonderful little love story too. Okay, that's the one thing that The Fall Guy and Twisters have in common, being at the top of this list. I like a movie, keep calling it like an 80s movie, but a movie that is like about something else but has this romantic subplot that, like, I'm fine if that's what's driving the character, just make it interesting. I also think that The Fall Guy took so many opportunities to just have fun with people who understand the industry. I think there were so many different things like that. I think they made so many intentional choices with like his Yahtzee bomber jacket. That is my number 1 movie of the year. I feel like 2024 overall, not having seen that many movies, I think I watched more movies that I enjoyed than I didn't. However, I would say with the exception of maybe like half of the top 10, there was no movie that I was truly like, this changed my life and I loved it and da-da-da. Like, to some extent, even though I do love a lot of these movies and The Fall Guy and Twisters, I look at some of the others and I'm like, I'm just not as, there wasn't like a La La Land, you know what I'm saying? There wasn't a Barbie. This has been too long already. Those are my top films of 2024. Let me know yours down below. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.